Hi, I'm Shane Croucher of International Business Times, and I'm joined today by the Shadow Defence Secretary, Vernon Coaker. Vernon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
you. First things first, Labour's committed to a strategic defence review to set out what the UK needs in terms of defence and how much it will cost. You said before that you'll push the Treasury to get what you want from in terms of spending for the review, but you'll probably not get everything. So, in effect, you're saying a Labour government wouldn't be able to meet the UK's defence needs. Isn't that right?
No, it's not right. What we're saying is that obviously our starting point is this financial year, which is 15-16, where we do meet the Nato requirement of 2%. What we're saying is that obviously there's a strategic defence review which is coming along, which will outline the needs, the capabilities that we need. But alongside that, of course, is a comprehensive spending review. But what we have said is that on the basis of what the strategic defence review tells us, then we'll fund that through the comprehensive spending review, and that will be our commitment going forward.
But there is a chance that you won't be able to meet everything in the review, surely?
Well, we've said, look, our commitment is to meet the needs of the strategic defence review. I'm not going to preempt here what that spending review will say, but I don't shirk either from the tough choices that will have to be made. It takes place within the context of an overall budget. We've heard both the leader of my party and the Shadow Chancellor talking about the need for us to eliminate the deficit by the end of the next Parliament. That gives us some flexibility, but I don't deny that there will be tough choices that will face us.
In your manifesto it says about the need to strengthen ties with Nato and the importance of NATO, like the Ukraine crisis, but as you've just said, you're not going to commit necessarily to that 2% target after 2015-16. So what I want to know is, do you really believe in that 2% target? Should it be 2%?
We believe in ensuring that we have a capability to meet the commitments that we have with respect to NATO. I'd remind everybody watching or listening to this that, of course, that Britain remains the second largest contributor to NATO. We understand the importance of that. We understand the importance of the relationship with America. So our commitment to NATO remains strong and it remains firm. It is also about, obviously, the capability that we have and ensuring that we have the necessary capability. But it's also reasserting the importance of NATO, looking at the threats that we currently face and how we best meet those. Nobody a few years ago looked at what was happening or understood the sort of threat and the problems that we're facing now in Eastern Europe with respect to Russia. That wasn't predicted a few years ago. We need to understand that. We need to look at what we need to do with respect to that. NATO needs to look at how it responds, and we'll do that.
But not necessarily with the 2% target. I mean, don't get hung up on the figure, is what you're saying about 2%.
I think you're saying, look, we will spend what we need to spend, but whether that'll be a matter for the spending review later on this year. But nobody should be in any doubt that we understand the importance of NATO, we understand the importance of the commitment that we have to our friends across Europe, and we understand the importance we have to our special friend America.
I want to ask you about arms exports as well, because in your manifesto it also asserts the need to fight for human rights and freedom across the world. I think it's fair to say that Labour's record in terms of arms exports is pretty poor, because you look at some of the countries that we've sold arms to before, particularly under the Blair administration, Libya, Saudi Arabia. I don't need to rehearse it all. So why should we trust you when you say you're going to fight for human rights and democracy? Aren't you just going to be cashing in on more blood money if you get into office?
Well, I think, look, you have to understand, I mean, it was the last Labour government that actually introduced the Human Rights Act. We've actually continued to commit to the European Court of Human Rights. We've also said that all of that remains important to us. So, as I say, I think as the previous government, also as a government hoping to be a government in a few weeks' time, we remain committed to human rights legislation, but we also understand the importance of defence exports, and we will do what we can to promote those and support industry and support them in the export market as well. I don't see necessarily a contradiction between the two. Obviously there are difficult choices with respect to that, but there's nothing wrong with defence exports, and there's nothing wrong with also supporting human rights.
But so some people might argue you can't do one and the other. For example, let's take Saudi Arabia. Everyone knows that its human rights record is pretty dismal. And by selling it arms, you're legitimising the regime there. Surely you're not sticking up for human rights. What would stick up for human rights is to say we're not going to sell you any more arms unless you change your record. These
are decisions you make in the context of regional and global interests and decisions that you make. Saudi Arabia is a really important partner for the UK. It's a really important stabilising influence in the region. So, you know, we will work closely with Saudi Arabia. We will continue to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, but also as a friend of ours, we will continue to discuss with them issues of mutual concern.
There's been some question about Ed Miliband's strength of character and whether or not he'd be able to handle himself in the, the international arena, taking on people like Putin and Xi Jinping and so on and so forth. So, I mean, why should we have faith in Ed Miliband's ability to take on the Putins, the Xi Jinpings?
I think one of the things you can say about Ed Miliband, and I think the election campaign we've had over the last few weeks demonstrates, that people have underestimated his strength of character, underestimated his personality. And just a few days ago he gave a speech at Chatham House where he laid out the sort of person that he would be. He's committed us to the renewal of the deterrent. He's committed us to being and remaining an important part of NATO, and he's reaffirmed the importance of us as a permanent member of the Security Council. And I think Ed Miliband, as a Prime Minister, as I hope he will actually be a strong leader for us as a country, but also a strong leader and playing his part in the alliances to which we belong.
And lastly, you've made it quite clear that you won't negotiate with the SNP in terms of defence, and there's no movement on Trident, anything like that. But could you personally work with the SNP if a deal had to be made?
We won't make a deal with the SNP. People need to be absolutely clear about that. We've ruled out a coalition and we've ruled out doing a deal with the Scottish National Party. We won't do that on a whole range of issues, and we're certainly not about to compromise with respect to our national security with the SNP. We're not going to do that, we won't do that, and there won't be a deal.
And just one more question actually, if I may. In your mind, what is the single biggest threat to British security?
I think you'd have to say some of the issues that you see around Islamic State and some of the implications that has for us. The ability to deal with Islamic State, the ability to deal with some of the tensions that there are in the Middle East and the way that impacts on security back at home, I think is really important. But that's not to underestimate the other threats we face with respect to the renewed problems in Eastern Europe, with respect to cyber. All of those things are big issues, and certainly something in the next strategic and security defence review we'll have to deal with.
Vernon Coaker, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.